Hello and welcome to the session Factors Influencing Education. Introduction. The education system of any nation is a very important institutional structure. Through the educational system, students are taught the skills they will need to become successful members of the society. It is through education students are made into dutiful citizens of a country. Because of that, states and political leaders put a special emphasis on maintaining and improving the educational systems of each country. All over the world, education is regarded as the bedrock to economic, political and technological advancement of a nation. This is why it is often emphasized that no nation can rise above its educational system. Education is demanded all over the world because economic and social developments are increasingly driven by the advancement and application of knowledge provided by education. It is a vast system all over the world which is influenced by a number of factors. These factors change from country to country and from culture to culture. The factors influencing education in India might be different from those influencing education in the United States. The relationship between education and society, bar culture, bar economy is a two-way and mutual one. Just as education system of a country influences its culture, economy, politics and ideas, the education system of a country is influenced by social, cultural, economic and political factors. So, it is important that we pay attention to the cultural and social specificities. This unit is an attempt to map some of the general factors influencing education all over the world and in all cultures. First one, the major factors influencing education are philosophical factors, social factors, cultural factors, political factors, psychological factors, economic factors. We will try to get an overview of all these factors in this unit. Module 2, Philosophical and Political Factors. Philosophical factors. All human societies, past and present, have had a vested interest in education. Children are born illiterate and innumerate and ignorant of the norms and cultural achievements of the community or society. But with the help of an educational system, with the help of professional teachers and the dedicated amateurs in their families and immediate environs, within a few years they learn to read, write and calculate. In other words, they learn to act in culturally appropriate ways. Some learn these skills with more facility than others. As a result, education also serves as a social sorting mechanism where some people are placed ahead of others on the basis of educational qualification. Education thus has an enormous impact on economic fate of the individual. Education equips individual with the skills and knowledge that allows them to define and to pursue their own goals. It also allows them to participate in the life of their community as full-fledged autonomous citizens. Thus, education is important both for an individual and for the society or state. Education is something that alters a person's life. For that reason, education is linked to questions of meaning of life. This is inevitably connected to philosophical issues. At the same time, education is a tool of the state or society to mold the thoughts and ideas of an individual. The ideologies ideas and philosophies of a society are imparted to an individual through education. Hence, philosophy is one major thing that shapes education and educational policies. Behind every educational system is a set of related beliefs, a philosophy of education that influences what and how students are taught. A philosophy of education is a major deciding factor on questions about the purpose of schooling, a teacher's role, and what should be taught and by what methods, and several other issues related to the modalities of education. There are always some deep philosophical questions that lie underneath education. They include: why human beings should be educated? What should decide the content of education? Who should educate human beings? How should human beings be educated? Aims and goals of human life, the right and duties of an individual. Educational programs are based on such a philosophy so that they can serve the humanity. Philosophy decides to mold educational policies and methods to suit the needs of a country or society. Philosophy helps education to adapt itself to the changing needs of the society. This influences every aspect of education. The most important areas influenced by philosophy are aims, functions, curriculum, method of teaching, textbook, teacher-student relationship, discipline, modes of assessing success. The aims of education are directly related to the aims of life. Aims of life are determined by the philosophy of life. The education system of a country will be determined by the philosophy of the state or government of a country too. An example is the totalitarian state. Totalitarianism or totalitarian rule is a political system where the state is usually under the power of a single political person, faction or class. It recognizes no limits to its authority and strives to regulate every aspect of public and private life wherever feasible. Such a state will educate its citizens for common good. The individual will not have a role in such a system. The democratic philosophy of democratic state will influence the educational systems of such a country. Thus, philosophy determines why a person should be educated and how. It also gives and limits the rights and powers of individuals through education. Another example is the early Indian Vedic education. This system of education was determined by the philosophy of the teachers who were deep-rooted in the Vedas. Likewise, in Western countries, the philosophy of the church or other religious or political institutions influences the systems of education. In the early history of the West, we can see that the ideology of the church determined education to a great extent. In early India, education was seen as a process of acquiring religious and philosophical insights on life. Mode of education and the relationship between the teacher and the student is also determined to a large extent by philosophy. In totalitarian educational system, the teacher becomes the center, and in democratic system, the student becomes the center. Teacher-centered philosophies tend to be more authoritarian and conservative and emphasize the values and knowledge that have survived through time. The major teacher-centered philosophy of education is essentialism. Student-centered philosophies are more focused on individual needs, contemporary relevance, and preparing students for a changing future. School is seen as an institution that works with youth to improve society or help students realize their individuality. Progressivism, social reconstructionism, and existentialism place the learner at the center of the educational process. Students and teachers work together on determining what should be learned and how best to learn it. It is the political or educational philosophy that decides what role, what degree of participation students as well as teachers should have in the educational process. An example of this is the DPEP educational system implemented in Kerala, in which students have a significant level of participation. Political factors. Another related factor that affects education is the political factor. The state has a say in the policies to be implemented in the educational system of a country. So, the political agendas and ideologies of the state influence education to a considerable degree. The political philosophy of a country determines the educational system of a country to a great extent. There are different political systems in the world, and these political systems influence the educational policies. There are three major political systems in the world. 1. Totalitarian state. A totalitarian state will assume complete control over the educational system. Students will be taught to accept the will of the state uncritically. The state will prescribe the curriculum, textbook, and course of study and modes of instruction. The absence of academic freedom is a feature of this system. The community or cultural groups will not have any room for participation in the education process. Second, democracy. In this, the burden of providing education is borne by society as a whole. The powers and resources are distributed between the central and state governments. In democratic societies, education is seen as the birthright of an individual. Importance is given to the development of individual. In a democratic state, there will be bodies independent of the state to decide on matters of education and educational policies. Module 3. Cultural and social factors. The educational systems of different cultures vary. Since education depends on the social and cultural life of each society, they are different for different cultures and society. The cultural patterns of a society determine the educational patterns of that society. For example, some cultures place importance on the spiritual aspect of life, and some others place influence on the materialistic aspect of life. The educational views of these cultures might vary on the basis of what they place importance on. Two principal agencies in society, the family and the school, powerfully shape education. The influence of these two agencies is constrained by the wider social and cultural systems into which they are embedded. There is great diversity in cultural backgrounds, social conditions, family arrangements, and that shapes the educational organization. The developments in the computer technology and telecommunication are of much interest and influence today's education. Every country has its distinctive culture, which plays an important role in shaping its social, economical, and political system. However, there are many outside influences that also play a significant role in shaping the social, economic, and political culture of countries. There was a time when state used to make policies according to their own cultural trends. These cultural trends altogether include language, history, race, and religion, as well as social, economic, and political system of the countries. However, the present trend of international relations has changed the traditional concepts of culture. This influences the prevailing social, economic, and political system of various countries of the world. Nonetheless, culture also includes the various social, economic, and political trends in any society. Countries of similar geographies and similar political organization tend to have similar educational cultures. For instance, the culture of education in the Western societies or the developed part of the globe is more or less same. Similarly, the various cultural trends in the developing countries regarding educational development vary from least developed country to developing country according to their level of development. However, all these cultural trends are rooted into the global cultural trends. Technology. In today's world, technology is a very important component as well as influence in education. The advent of computer technology and telecommunication has reshaped education in a significant way. Technology, in other words, is both an end and a means in education. Technological advancement determines educational structures. At the same time, the compulsion to cope with a technologically advanced society requires education to change and adapt itself to the new scenario. Technology has helped to transform educational programs and policies. In this modern technology-dependent world, it is imperative to get a quality education. While economic and social factors are often solely blamed for educational inequities, there are many factors that affect education legislation. Through taxes, political promises for special interest groups, and efforts to encourage international competition through technology and academics, millions of students are affected by educational policies. Globalization. With the advent and rise of technology, the world has essentially become a global community. Through trade and political connections, this technology-based global community has also impacted education. Due to the almost instant exchange of ideas and information, students are no longer just competing with other local and national students. They are competing with students from around the world for admittance to colleges and for jobs. This development has forced school systems to increase already rigorous curricula in order to prepare students to compete in this global arena. Home and community environment. The next immediate social factor is the home and community environment. The following factors play a crucial role. Parents and their nature. Their effectiveness as parents, their effectiveness as role models, their ability to provide a comfortable, healthy, nurturing home environment, the social and economic status of family and community, social backwardness of a community. Though many can overcome limitations in home and community, many cannot easily do this. Of course, these factors are interrelated in the sense that all influence the student in various degrees depending on the student and circumstances. Thus, all of these factors, parents, peers, and community, can potentially make a difference for good or ill. But a positive, healthy influence from parents, a positive, healthy influence from peers, and a positive, healthy influence from community, each and all usually help a great deal. In India, there are many studies in the recent past on the social backwardness of students and its impact on education. It has been shown that students coming from backward classes and caste in India fail to obtain higher education. The reservation policies of post-independent India were one of the major policies to overcome this problem. In Western countries also, there are methods such as affirmative action to facilitate social justice and erase disparity. Teachers and their effectiveness. The role of the teacher is, of course, to encourage and facilitate education. In the formal sense, the teacher is responsible for the immediate learning environment, the means and effectiveness of instruction, the cultivation of understanding on the part of the students. But the teacher is not infallible, nor is the teacher necessarily an authority in any field of knowledge. He or she is simply well educated in that field, well trained in teaching method, and temperamentally well suited to the role of teacher. But the teacher is also a student and needs to learn from the teaching experience, to learn as well from the students, and to evolve in his or her teaching role. The most effective teachers tend to be non-prescriptive, non-imposing, creating an effective learning environment, earning the trust and respect of students, and generating a rapport with his or her students. In an enlightened society, the best people in each field become the leaders and teachers in that field without consideration for rewards or status. But even where teachers are well qualified and properly motivated, where they are inherently very effective, they are still subjected to the limitations of the student, what the student bring to school, and the limitations or boundary conditions imposed by school administrators. Within these various initial conditions and boundary conditions, the challenges facing the teacher are considerable. Module 4. Psychological factors and economic factors. Psychological factors. There are a number of psychological factors and sub-factors that determine the efficacy of education. First and foremost are the student and the nature of the student. Secondly, the home and the community environment in which the student lives. Third, teachers and how effectively they perform their duties. And last but not least, the academic environment including school administrators and the manner and character of administration. All of these factors are important. The student himself or herself is the central factor. The primary purpose of education is to meet the needs of the student, that is, to effectively educate the student and prepare him or her to function effectively in the world. This includes preparing the student for proper employment and contributing positively to the community. This process, if it has to be successful, should be according to his or her talents and interest. The secondary purpose of education is to educate and guide the student in such a way as to meet the needs of the community. Healthy, effective education does both. Effective education is tailored to both the needs of the particular student and the needs of the particular community. The role of the student is simply to learn as much as he or she can, given the various educational opportunities, personal interest, talents and abilities and community needs. The nature of the student who is at the receiving end therefore plays a very crucial role in education. There are two types of learning involved in any educational process. There is a core of material, knowledge, understanding and learning experience that most students need to learn regardless of interest, talents and abilities and community needs. And there is additional material and experience that students need that is more unique to their particular needs and interest. The success of the educational system depends to a huge extent on how the student respond to these two types of learning. Learning is so much about knowledge, and knowledge and skill are the major ingredients of education. Understanding is much more important than knowledge, but there needs to be a sufficient knowledge base. Thus, perhaps the most important accomplishment on the part of the student is learning how to learn, to develop the capacity for learning, for effectively accumulating and assessing knowledge, for effectively assimilating that knowledge into understanding, and effectively assimilating that understanding into wisdom. But much depends on the central factor of the student himself, namely his or her inherent consciousness, intelligence, learning abilities, receptivity to learning. Regardless of circumstances, some students are simply able to learn more effectively and others less so. Closely related sub-factors are the various learning abilities and disabilities a student may have. Some people learn more effectively in certain ways and less so in other ways. Education that takes this into consideration without compromising the integrity of education is more effective. But care must be taken to cultivate a broadening of a student's abilities to learn. The student needs to enjoy learning, or to learn how to enjoy learning, so that learning becomes a lifelong process. The student needs to take education and learning seriously, but without unnecessary pressures or intensity. If this learning nature is not already present, then it needs to be encouraged, cultivated and developed. That is a very important factor of influence in education. The role of the teacher becomes important here. Teachers can make a considerable difference in the education process. Teachers are in a position to motivate and challenge their students. Teachers are in a position to be positive, healthy role models. Teachers are in a position to provide needed knowledge and an appropriate context for that knowledge to the considerable benefit of their students. Students will learn from their teachers for good or ill, and usually both. So, it is very important that teachers be well qualified both in their field and as teachers, and well motivated and properly supported by parents, and properly supported financially, materially, emotionally, professionally and otherwise by the school and community itself. Economic factors. Education is a result of economic development. The quality of education is also determined by the economic factors of a country. The economic condition of a country influences the educational opportunity it can provide to its citizens. A poor country cannot provide adequate educational facilities to its citizens. Also, the economic condition of a family influences the educational opportunity of its members. This is also linked to the economic background. It has been shown in studies that students from low economic backgrounds do not have adequate access to higher education. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. This unit was an attempt to lay out the major factors influencing education. Though these factors change from country to country and from culture to culture, we have tried to arrive some general issues with regard to this. Education influences economy, politics and culture of a country, and is in turn influenced by all these factors. Also, in the wake of advancement of technology and the advancement of globalization and privatization, we need to consider the factors influencing education in a different light. The social parity and the access to education has been a major concern for education policy makers. The economic and social background of the students determine their opportunity to acquire education. The political environment of the country and the political philosophy and ideology of the state plays a major role in defining the curriculum and methods of pedagogy. The cultural doctrines of a country have its own impact on the educational policies, though with the advent of professional and privatized education, such doctrines are not paid much attention to. Now, you can try to answer the given questions here. Assignments. First one, what are the totalitarian views of education? Second, what is the impact of globalization on education? Third, how do economic factors influence education? Fourth, describe how philosophical factors influence education. Now, you can go through the reference books listed here. Christopher B. Swanson and Janelle Barlard, A Study of the Factors Shaping Education Policy, Editorial Projects in Education Research Center, December 2006. Michael West, Education and Psychology, Bibliobazar, 2010, Nell Nordings, Philosophy of Education, Westview Press, 2006. Thank you for watching this program. Hope that you have enjoyed the session. Take care.